The sky above Catharix Prime tore open with fire. Queen Selthyra stood on the crystal balcony of her palace, her four eyes narrowing as the burning streak descended beyond the Valewood Mountains. Her royal guard commander Vexnar materialized at her side within seconds, his posture rigid, breathing controlled despite having sprinted 3 palace levels. Your Majesty. Unknown vessel entering atmosphere. Trajectory suggests uncontrolled descent into the Forbidden Forest. The Queen's silver scales rippled in the evening light. She touched the thought crystal at her throat, activating the palace defense grid. Origin? Unknown. The signature doesn't match any known species in the Coalition databases. Scramble, intercept teams. If whatever survives the crash attempts to cross the barrier seal, with respect, Your Majesty, nothing survives entry into the Forbidden Forest. The goddess ensures it. Selthyra's throat sac flared. The goddess has been imprisoned there for 12 centuries specifically because she cannot die. If something has crashed where she dwells, we must assume the worst. Vexnar's scales darkened a battle gray. He turned sharply, issuing commands through his Neuralink. Within moments, 3 atmospheric gunships lifted from the palace garrison, their engines screaming toward the distant mountains. The Queen watched them go, her primary hands clenched. The Forbidden Forest had been sealed by her ancestors after the War of Shattering Skies, when the goddess Lythara had nearly unmade reality itself in grief. The dimensional barriers surrounding those ancient woods required the life force of 3 priestesses daily just to maintain. Nothing entered, nothing left, until tonight. A young attendant, barely past her 7th molting, rushed onto the balcony. Her scales were flushed purple with anxiety. Your Majesty, the barrier priestesses report fluctuations. The Western Seal is destabilizing. How badly? They cannot say. The readings make no sense. It's as if something inside is pulling at reality itself. Selthyra's blood went cold. She strode from the balcony, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her. Vexnar fell into step immediately, his weapon hand resting on the plasma sword at his hip. Ready my transport. I'm going to the forest perimeter myself. Your Majesty, protocol explicitly. Protocol was written before something fell from the stars into the one place in this galaxy we dare not disturb. The Queen's voice carried the harmonic edge of absolute authority. Assemble the Royal Vanguard. Full ceremonial armor. If the goddess awakens, she must see the crown has not forgotten the old oaths. Vexnar's hesitation lasted exactly 2 heartbeats. Then he bowed, scales shifting to respectful bronze. As you command. The royal transport lifted into the darkening sky minutes later, flanked by 12 elite guards in mirror-polished armor that reflected the dying sunlight like captured stars. The Queen sat in silence, her primary hands folded, secondary hands manipulating the ancient scrolls she'd ordered brought from the vault. The prophecies her grandmother had sealed away, the ones that spoke of fire from beyond the void and the awakening of the sleeper. She'd always assumed them to be poetry, metaphor, the desperate hope of a people who'd imprisoned their own goddess and lived with that guilt for generations. Now the words seemed less like hope and more like warning. The forest appeared on the horizon as 3 moons began their rise. The Valewood was aptly named, even from altitude. Its canopy seemed to drink light, creating a void of shadow against the landscape. The barrier itself was invisible to most species, but Selthyra's royal bloodline could perceive it as a shimmer of silver gold suspended in the air like a frozen waterfall encircling the entire forest. The barrier was flickering. Land at the primary observation post, she commanded. The transport descended to a fortified structure built into the mountainside overlooking the forest. The garrison commander, an older warrior named Takesh, awaited them at the landing platform. His scales bore the scars of 40 campaigns, but his eyes held something Selthyra had never seen in them before. Fear. Your Majesty, you should not have come. A report. Takesh gestured toward the forest. The crash site is approximately 12 kilometers inside the barrier. We detected massive energy discharge on impact. Then we heard singing. Every scale on Selthyra's body stood rigid. Singing? The goddess, Your Majesty? For the first time in 300 years, she is singing. And something in the forest is singing back. The Queen stepped to the observation wall, her eyes fixing on the dark expanse below. The barrier continued its irregular flickering, and now that she was closer, she could feel it. A pull, like the tide of some vast cosmic ocean drawing everything toward a single point deep within the woods. What species was the vessel? We don't know. The debris signature suggests technology we've never encountered. But Your Majesty? Takesh's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We detected a life sign. Moving. Heading directly toward the goddess's prison tree. Alone? Alone. Selthyra felt her heart's beating out of sync, an ancestral response to profound wrongness in the universe. How long until they reach the tree? At current pace, perhaps 2 hours. But nothing should be able to move through that forest. The goddess's grief has made it a place of madness and decay. The few exploration teams we sent in centuries ago were found frozen in crystal, their minds shattered by visions of the world's ending. Yet something walks through it now, singing. Yes, Your Majesty. The Queen turned to Vexnar. Prepare a breach team. We're going in. Every guard in earshot stiffened. Takesh stepped forward, his secondary arms raised in supplication. Your Majesty, the barrier exists for reason beyond the goddess's containment. The forest itself is poisoned with her sorrow. Your mind will not survive. That whatever fell from the sky has a very good reason for waking a sleeping god. Far below, in the depths of the forbidden forest, a human pilot named Marcus Chen pulled himself from the wreckage of the exploration pod and looked up at trees that seemed to absorb reality itself. His head was bleeding, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, someone was singing a song of such profound sadness that his heart physically ached. He activated his helmet light and began walking toward the sound. Behind him, his ship's AI repeated its warning about dimensional instability and psychological contamination zones. He'd come too far across the galaxy to turn back now. The trees closed behind him like a door sealing shut. Marcus had no idea how long he'd been walking. Time felt elastic here, stretching and compressing like reality couldn't decide on a consistent flow. The singing had grown louder, more complex, layered with harmonies that shouldn't be possible from a single voice. His tactical display had stopped functioning the moment he'd crossed the crash site perimeter, leaving him with nothing but intuition and the pull in his chest that felt less like direction and more like gravity. The trees here were wrong. Their bark had a crystalline quality that reflected images that weren't there. Faces, battles, cities burning, lovers embracing, children crying. Marcus forced himself to look straight ahead after glimpsing his own face twisted in a scream of absolute despair. This is how she feels, he realized aloud. His voice came out strange, echoed by the forest itself. This is what it's like inside her mind. The singing stopped. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma pistol at his hip. The weapon felt suddenly useless, like bringing a candle to fight a supernova. Who speaks in my prison? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonant with layers of meaning his mind struggled to process. Who dares walk through my grief? My name is Marcus Chen. I'm human, from Earth. I didn't mean to crash here. I'm sorry if I've disturbed. Disturbed? The word rippled through reality. The trees shook. Crystal formations burst from the ground around him, each one containing frozen moments of anguish. You are the first voice I have heard in 300 years that did not scream in madness. You are the first to apologize. Come and see what your courtesy has awakened. Marcus moved forward because stopping seemed more dangerous than continuing. The forest opened into a clearing that shouldn't exist, a perfect circle of dead grass surrounding a tree so massive it seemed to hold up the sky itself. The trunk was wrapped in chains of pure light, each link inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly, and within the tree, visible through the translucent bark, was a woman. She was easily 20 feet tall, her form vaguely humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin seemed to shift between solid matter and starlight. Her hair moved like it was underwater, flowing in currents of an invisible cosmic ocean. Her eyes were closed, but tears ran down her face in continuous streams, pooling at the base of the tree where they had formed a small lake of liquid silver. Lethara, Marcus whispered. The name came to him like memory, though he'd never heard it before. You know me? Her eyes opened. They contained entire galaxies swirling with the births and deaths of stars. Marcus felt his mind begin to fray at the edges just from meeting her gaze. Or does the universe remember through you? I don't understand. Understanding is not required for truth. Lethara's massive form shifted within her prison. The chains brightened, burning brighter. She gasped in pain but didn't look away from Marcus. You fell from the sky in fire. You walk through my grief without falling. You carry something. Show me what technology humans have wrought. Marcus hesitated, then pulled his scanner from his belt. It was damaged, sparking intermittently, but still functional. He held it up. Lethara laughed, and the sound was like stars exploding. A tool to measure reality. How delightfully naive. Tell me, human, can your device measure sorrow? No. Regret? No. The precise weight of love that has nowhere to go. Her voice cracked. More tears fell. They imprisoned me here after the war. They said I threatened reality itself with my grief. They were right. When he died, when my beloved was murdered, in the political machinations of their courts, I nearly unmade creation in my rage. So they sealed me in this place, fed their own people to the barrier just to keep me contained. And do you know what they told me? That time would heal. That eventually the pain would fade. Do you know how long I have been here? The outside world says 12 centuries. 1,200 years of every single moment feeling like the instant of his death. 1,200 years of grief that does not diminish, does not transform, does not grant me even the mercy of numbness. I am a goddess human. I cannot die. I can only suffer. Marcus felt wetness on his own cheeks. I'm sorry. There it is again. That word, sorry. Lythara's hand, bound in chains, reached toward him. She couldn't get closer than a few feet from the tree trunk. Do you mean it? Or is it simply a sound you make? I mean it. No one deserves this. Not for any reason. And yet here we are. You, broken by your fall. Me, broken by my heart. Two beings who should not have met, speaking across a void of grief. She paused, her galaxy's eyes narrowing. Your ship. It breached their barrier when it crashed. I felt the dimensional walls crack. The damage is spreading. Within hours, my prison will fail completely. You'll be free. Free? Lythara's laugh was bitter as poison. I will be free to finish what I started 12 centuries ago. The moment these chains break, every ounce of grief I have accumulated will be released into this reality. Planets will weep themselves to dust, stars will dim and die. The very fabric of space will tear under the weight of my sorrow. Your crash, human, has doomed this galaxy. Marcus felt the weight of those words settle into his bones. Then we have to stop it. There must be a way. The grief is part of me now. It is me. They thought containment would heal me. Instead, it preserved the wound perfectly, kept it fresh and bleeding for 1,000 years. When I emerge, I will be a god of ending things. But you don't want that. Lythara was quiet for a long moment. How did you know? Because you warned me. Because you're crying. Because you said my courtesy awakened something. If you truly wanted to destroy everything, you wouldn't care about a random human who crashed into your prison. Marcus stepped closer to the tree, ignoring the way reality seemed to thin around him. You're asking for help, aren't you? The goddess's form shimmered. For a moment she looked smaller, more human-sized, more vulnerable. I don't know how to ask. Gods command. They decree. They do not beg. Then don't beg. Just tell me what you need. I need, Lythara's voice broke. I need someone to remember him. Not what he became in death, not the catalyst for war, not the diplomatic incident. Him, Velthor, my love, my heart. The way he laughed when it rained, the way he held my hand as if I were fragile despite being a goddess. The way he saw me not as power to be courted, but as person to be loved. They've erased him from history. Made him a footnote in my tragedy. I need someone to know he existed as more than my reason for rage. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Not physical. Something deeper. Tell me about him. What? Tell me about Velthor. I'll remember. I promise. You are one human. You will die in decades. Your memory means nothing against eternity. Then it means everything right now. Lythara stared at him, her cosmic eyes searching for deception, for mockery, for any reason to refuse. She found none. Then, slowly, carefully, she began to speak. He was a philosopher. Not a warrior, not a lord, just a scholar who asked questions about the nature of consciousness and divinity. He asked me one day if gods could truly love, or if we only experience pale imitations of emotion. I was offended at first. Then he smiled and said he hoped I could, because he thought he might be falling in love with me. I told him he was mad. He agreed completely. Marcus sat down in the dead grass, ignoring the way it cut his hands. What happened next? We talked for 6 hours. Then 6 days. Then we stopped counting. He never worshipped me. He argued with me. He challenged my assumptions about existence. He made me laugh. Do you understand? A god, laughing like a mortal fool.
He gave me that gift.
He sounds incredible.
He was.
And they killed him because a faction of the royal court feared my attachment to a mortal would make me vulnerable. They were right. I was vulnerable. I am still vulnerable. Her tears fell faster. They took everything from me and expected me to simply accept it, to move on, to understand political necessity. Instead, I screamed and nearly shattered the world. That's why they imprisoned you. Yes, to save reality from my love. Lythara's chains pulsed. But you see the problem, don't you, Marcus Chen of Earth? Your crash has started a cascade failure. The barrier won't hold. I will be released whether I wish it or not. And when I am, all this grief becomes reality's problem. Unless we find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. Marcus stood, brushing off the crystal grass. On Earth we have a saying, the only way out is through. You can't contain grief forever. You can't seal it away and expect it to simply disappear. It has to be processed, transformed, carried. I am a goddess. I do not process emotions like mortals. Then learn, because the alternative is destroying everything, and I don't think you actually want that. I think you're tired and hurt, and you've been alone for so long that you've forgotten what comes after grief. Love does. Memory does. Marcus approached the tree, getting close enough to feel the heat radiating from the divine chains. Let me help you. You cannot break these chains. They are woven from the life force of priestesses fed daily with sacrifice. I don't need to break them. I need to change what they're containing. Marcus pulled out his damaged scanner, his engineering multi-tool, his emergency beacon, a pile of useless technology against a divine prison. Then he reached up and touched one of the chains. Light exploded through his nervous system. He saw everything. The lives of the priestesses bound into the barrier, their willing sacrifice to contain a goddess's rage, their prayers repeated daily for 1,200 years, their hope that somehow, someday, healing would come. He saw Lythara's perspective, the endless loop of the moment Velthor died, playing over and over without variation or mercy. He saw the dimensional mathematics that held the prison stable, equations written in suffering and duty, and he saw the flaw. The chains weren't designed to contain grief. They were designed to contain a goddess who was grieving. Different things entirely. The barrier worked on the assumption that Lythara's power was the threat, but her power wasn't the problem. Her unprocessed trauma was. Marcus opened his eyes. Blood ran from his nose. His hand was burned where he'd touched the chain. I know how to fix this. Lythara was staring at him with something like wonder. You survived contact with the barrier. Mortals don't survive that. I'm stubborn, also probably in shock. Listen, the chains are feeding off the grief. The more you suffer, the stronger they become. It's a perfect loop. Your pain powers your prison. I know this. But what if the emotion changed? What if instead of grief you felt something else? You cannot simply choose to feel differently. No, but you can add to it. You can make grief more complex. Marcus stepped back, his mind racing. You said the pain never diminishes. That's because the chains are preserving it perfectly, keeping it pure and powerful. But real grief isn't pure. It's messy. It transforms over time. It becomes entangled with other feelings. Love. Gratitude. Even joy at having experienced the thing you lost. Lythara's form flickered. You want me to be grateful I fell in love only to lose him? I want you to remember that love happened at all. Right now, you're trapped in the moment of ending. You've forgotten the beginning and middle. The chains want you to forget because your rage makes you easy to contain. But if you remember everything, all of it, the complexity will corrupt the binding spell. It's not designed to handle nuanced emotion. That's insane. That's human. Marcus smiled despite the pain radiating through his body. We survive by making our suffering more complicated than anyone expects. Tell me another story about Velthor. Not about his death, about his life. Lythara hesitated. Then, slowly, she began speaking again. She told Marcus about the first time Velthor had brought her a flower from his garden, a simple gesture that had baffled her because gods weren't given flowers. She told him about philosophical debates that lasted until dawn, about the way Velthor would fall asleep mid-sentence when he was particularly tired, about his terrible singing voice that somehow made her smile. With each memory, the chains flickered slightly. With each story, Lythara's tears changed from pure silver to something more opalescent, complex, carrying shades of color they hadn't held before. Marcus listened and remembered and kept his promise to witness a love that had been erased from history. Hours passed. The 3 moons reached their zenith above the forest. And slowly, impossibly, the chains began to unravel not through force, but through transformation. The grief they contained became too multifaceted to maintain the binding equation. Joy mixed with sorrow, loss tangled with gratitude. Rage softened into bittersweetness. The prison wasn't breaking. It was dissolving. There was a difference. Outside the forest, Queen Selthyra watched as the barrier fluctuations intensified. The priestesses maintaining the seal reported something unprecedented happening. The goddess's emotional signature was changing. The rage was being metabolized into something their equations couldn't classify. "Should we send in the breach team?" Vexnar asked. The queen raised her hand for silence. "No, we wait. Something is happening that was not prophesied. I want to see how it ends." In the clearing, Marcus collapsed to his knees. He'd been standing for hours, his broken arm screaming, his concussion making the world tilt dangerously. But Lythara was still talking, still remembering, and the chains were growing dimmer with each word. "He proposed to me in a rainstorm," she was saying, her voice no longer carrying the resonance of divine power, but something more intimate, more personal. It was ridiculous. Gods don't marry, but he asked anyway because he was brave enough to be absurd. I said yes. We had 300 years together before politics and fear took him from me. 300 years that I've been trying to forget for 1,200 more. "Don't forget," Marcus managed through cracked lips. "Never forget. Those 300 years are the victory, not the ending. They won. Love won. Everything else is just aftermath." Lythara looked at him with eyes that were no longer galactic voids, but something closer to human. Tears still fell, but they were gentle now, cleansing rather than corrosive. "You truly believe that?" "I believe grief is the price we pay for love, and that price means it was worth something. The chains want you to think only the price matters." "They're wrong. The last chain shattered, not exploded, not broken. It simply dissolved, the energy releasing not as destruction, but as a wash of warmth that spread through the clearing like a sigh of relief." Lythara stepped away from the tree for the first time in 12 centuries. She was smaller now, maybe 8 feet tall, more solid than stellar. She looked less like a force of nature and more like a being who had survived something terrible and was still standing. She knelt before Marcus, her hand, normal-sized now, merely large rather than cosmic, touching his shoulder gently. "You saved me. I listened. That's all. That was everything." Lythara's other hand glowed softly. "You were dying. Your crash injuries have been killing you slowly this entire time. You should have been dead an hour ago." Marcus tried to laugh but coughed blood instead. "Stubborn, remember. I can heal you. I am diminished but not powerless. Will you accept the goddess's gratitude? Only if you promise to leave this place. Go back to the world. Live. Honor Velthor by not letting his death be your only story." Lythara smiled, and it was sad but genuine. "I promise. Though the world may not welcome a goddess who nearly destroyed it. Then they're idiots." Marcus felt warmth spreading through his body, knitting bone, sealing vessels, pushing back the darkness at the edge of his vision. Thank you, Marcus Chen. You are the first priest I have ever had, and you didn't even know it. Not really the religious type, the best priests never are." Outside the forest, the barrier collapsed completely. Not violently. It simply faded like morning mist under sunlight. Queen Selthyra's guards raised their weapons as 2 figures emerged from the tree line. One was unmistakably the goddess, though transformed, diminished, more mortal than the legend suggested possible. The other was a human in a tattered flight suit, limping but alive, supported by the goddess's arm. Selthyra commanded. Every guard froze. The queen descended from the observation post, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her, and stopped 10 feet from the goddess who had been imprisoned by her ancestors. "Lythara. Selthyra, you wear the crown well. Your grandmother would be proud. You remember her?" "I remember everything now, including why I was sealed away." "Including that your people were right to fear me." Lythara's free hand touched her chest, but the human reminded me that fear and rage were not my only options. "I am changed. Reduced, perhaps, but whole in a way I have not been since before the war." Selthyra's 4 eyes studied the goddess, then shifted to Marcus. "You crashed into the Forbidden Forest and emerged having tamed a deity?" "I didn't tame her. I just listened to her story." Marcus was swaying on his feet. "Also, I think I have another concussion. Or the same one. It's hard to tell." "Get this human medical attention immediately," the queen commanded. Medics rushed forward. Marcus tried to protest, but was quickly surrounded by concerned Catharaxian medical personnel. Selthyra turned back to Lithara. "What happens now? You are free. My ancestor's sentence has been broken. Will you seek vengeance on those who imprisoned you? No?" Lithara looked back at the forest, at the tree that had been her cage, at the clearing where she had finally learned to carry her grief rather than be crushed by it. "I will seek something harder than vengeance. I will seek peace. But I will need help. I have been alone for so long, I no longer know how to be a person rather than a wound." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she extended her primary hand, palm up, in the Catharaxian gesture of welcome. "Then perhaps it is time my people apologized, not by offering imprisonment, but by offering community. We have a guest suite in the palace that has been empty since the war. It is yours if you wish it." Lithara stared at the offered hand as if it were the most alien thing she had ever encountered. "You would trust me in your palace? I would trust that the human was right about you. And if he was wrong, well, better to discover it while you are close enough that I can look you in the eye." Selthyra's throat sac flared slightly, the equivalent of a small smile. Also, practical matters. The barrier was fed by the lives of priestesses for 12 centuries. They are now released from their duty. We must find them new purpose. You could teach them. About transformation rather than containment. About carrying grief rather than sealing it away. I am no teacher. Then you will learn together, as all the best teachers do. Lithara took the queen's hand. The touch was brief but significant. "Your ancestors would be furious with you for this decision. Good. They made many wise choices, but imprisoning grief rather than allowing it to heal was not among them." Selthyra gestured toward the transports. "Come, both of you. There are many questions to answer, many stories to record. Marcus Chen's arrival will be discussed for generations. He has accidentally rewritten 1,000 years of theological doctrine by being stubborn and kind." Marcus, being loaded onto a medical stretcher, groaned. "I just wanted to explore the galaxy. Maybe find cool rocks. Not rewrite theology." "Too late," Lithara called to him, humor in her voice for the first time in centuries. "You are now the patron saint of listening." "How does it feel?" "Honestly, do patron saints get dental coverage?" Even Selthyra's guards cracked smiles at that. The convoy returned to the palace as the sun rose over Catharax Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. In the medical bay, Marcus was diagnosed with 3 broken ribs, a fractured arm, severe concussion, and a dozen other injuries that should have killed him. The doctors argued for weeks about whether divine intervention or pure human stubbornness had kept him alive. Eventually, they decided it was both. Lithara took the guest suite, though she rarely stayed in it. She spent her days walking the palace gardens, relearning what it meant to exist in the world rather than be trapped in a single moment of pain. The priestesses, released from their duties maintaining the barrier, came to her not as prisoners guarding a prisoner, but as students seeking to understand transformation. She taught them what Marcus had shown her, that the only way through suffering was to make it more complex, more nuanced, to weave it together with other experiences until it became part of a tapestry rather than the whole cloth. Marcus recovered slowly. He found himself in the strange position of being a celebrity he'd never intended to become. Various factions wanted to interview him, study him, understand how a random human explorer had accomplished what 12 centuries of the greatest minds in the Catharaxian Empire had failed to do. His answer was always the same: "I just listened." 3 months after the crash, Marcus stood in the same garden where Lithara spent her mornings. She was tending flowers now, an act that would have been impossible when she was nothing but condensed grief and rage. She looked up as he approached, her form settled at a consistent 7 feet, her features no longer shifting between mortal and cosmic. "How are you?" she asked. "Still sore. The doctors say I'll have interesting scars. Apparently being healed by a goddess leaves marks that don't quite look like normal tissue." Marcus sat on the stone bench beside her. "How are you?" "Better. Some days are harder than others. I still think about him, about Velthor, about the life we didn't get to finish. But I also remember the life we did have, and that helps. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything." "You knew it already. You just needed permission to remember." Lithara smiled, and it was soft and sad and genuine all at once. "The priestesses asked me yesterday if I would ever love again. I told them I didn't know, but that I was open to the possibility." That felt significant. Admitting that my story isn't over even though a chapter ended in tragedy. "That's healing," Marcus said quietly. That's what it looks like. Is it? I have no reference. Gods are not known for their emotional growth. Then you're pioneering a new field, emotional archaeology for divine beings. Marcus stood, wincing slightly at the pull in his ribs. I should probably head back. My ship is almost repaired. I need to figure out what I'm doing next. You're leaving? Eventually. Not today. Maybe not for a while. The Queen asked me to consult on some kind of cultural exchange program between Earth and Catharax. Apparently my unique perspective is valuable. Her words, not mine. Will you come back? Marcus looked at her, at this being who was simultaneously ancient and newborn, god and survivor. Yeah. Someone needs to make sure you're not sealing yourself in trees again. Lithara laughed, and the sound was light and clear, nothing like the world-shattering resonance it had carried in the prison. I appreciate the concern. That evening, Queen Selthyra held a small ceremony in the palace courtyard. It wasn't a grand affair, just the goddess, the human, the queen, her personal guard, and the former priestesses who had maintained the barrier for so long. No crowds, no press. Just the people who had lived through the transformation. 1,200 years ago, my ancestors made a choice born of fear and necessity, Selthyra said, her voice carrying easily in the quiet space. They imprisoned a goddess because they could not imagine another way to protect reality from grief so powerful it could unmake existence. They were not wrong to fear that power. But they were incomplete in their solution. Containment is not healing. Forgetting is not justice. Today we acknowledge this publicly. Lithara, on behalf of the Catharaxian people, I offer what should have been offered centuries ago. Our apology, our recognition of your suffering, and our commitment to helping you carry what we helped create.
Lithara bowed her head.
Tears ran down her face, but they were different tears now, complex and multifaceted. I accept your apology, and I offer mine in return. My rage endangered your world. My pain nearly shattered your reality. That I was suffering does not excuse the harm I almost caused. I am glad we found another way, because of him. Selthyra gestured to Marcus. A stranger from a species we have never encountered who crashed into our most forbidden place and somehow saw past legend to personhood. Marcus Chan, you are hereby granted honorary citizenship of Catarax Prime, full access to our research facilities for your scientific work, and a standing invitation to our table whenever you are in this sector of the galaxy. We also ask permission to record your story so that future generations understand that sometimes the greatest transformations come not from grand gestures but from simple witnessing. Marcus felt his face heating up. I really didn't do anything special. You made a goddess remember she was a person, Vexnar interrupted, his usually stoic voice carrying unexpected warmth. That is the most special thing any of us have seen in our lifetimes. The ceremony ended with shared food and stories. Marcus found himself recounting Earth's myths and legends while the Catharaxians shared their own. Lithara spoke about Veltor, and this time the listeners understood they were being given a gift rather than witnessing a trauma. The young attendant who had first alerted the Queen to the barrier fluctuations asked shy questions about human customs. Lithara answered some, Marcus answered others, and they laughed together when neither knew the answer. Late into the night, after most had retired, Marcus and Lithara stood together on the crystal balcony where the Queen had first watched his ship crash into the forbidden forest. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd missed the forest? If you'd crashed somewhere else? Lithara asked. All the time. But I didn't. I ended up exactly where I needed to be, for reasons I'll probably never fully understand. The universe is like that sometimes. Cruel in its precision, or kind in its chaos. Depends on how you look at it. Marcus leaned against the railing. I'm glad I crashed there. I'm glad I met you. Even if it means I have nightmares about cosmic sadness sometimes. Do you really? The nightmares? Yeah, but they're getting better. I dream about the stories you told, too. About Veltor and his terrible singing. About philosophical debates and rainstorms. Those dreams are nice. Lithara was quiet for a moment. Then she asked very softly, Marcus, why did you help me? You could have run. You should have run. Staying was illogical and dangerous. Because you needed someone to see you. Not the goddess, not the threat. You. The person drowning in grief and desperately hoping someone would notice. I've been there. Different scale, but the same feeling. I couldn't leave you alone with it. Thank you. Any time. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moons move across the sky. Below them, the city of Catharax Prime glowed with bioluminescent architecture, beautiful and strange, And in the distance, where the mountains stood dark against the stars, the forbidden forest was no longer forbidden, just a forest. The weight of 1,000 years finally lifted. In the palace archives, historians began the work of documenting everything that had happened. They recorded Marcus's story in meticulous detail. They gathered testimony from the medical staff who had treated him, the guards who had witnessed his emergence from the forest, the queen who had made the choice to offer welcome instead of imprisonment. They interviewed Lithara, carefully and respectfully creating for the first time in Cataraxian history a record of divine perspective on suffering and healing. The story would become legend, as these things do. But it would be a different kind of legend. One about listening rather than conquest, about transformation rather than power, about the strange and necessary act of bearing witness to another being's pain. Years later, when Marcus finally returned to Earth with tales of his travels, how could he convey the weight of a goddess's grief? The complexity of walking through a forest made of someone's trauma? The profound simplicity of just listening when someone needed to be heard? He tried anyway. Because that's what humans do. They tell stories, however imperfect, and hope that somewhere in the telling, truth survives. And on Kurdak's prime, Lithara continued her slow transformation from goddess of ending things to something new. Not quite mortal, not quite divine, but fully, completely alive. She taught. She learned. She remembered Velthor not as a wound, but as a gift she had been lucky enough to receive. The grief never fully disappeared, but it evolved into something she could carry rather than something that crushed her. Some nights she would return to the forest that had been her prison. Not to dwell, but to remember. The tree stood empty now, its chains dissolved, a monument to suffering that had finally ended. She would touch its bark and think about the human who had stumbled into her pain and refused to let her drown in it alone. "Thank you," she would whisper to the empty air, knowing somehow that Marcus, wherever he was in the galaxy, could feel the gratitude across the cosmic distance between them. In the end, that was what survival looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of witnesses willing to confirm that pain had been real, had mattered, and had not been the entire story. The crash had been an accident. The healing was a choice, and in between those two moments, a human and a goddess had reminded each other that the only way through was together. The universe went on turning. Stars were born and died. Civilizations rose and fell. And somewhere in the vast complexity of existence, a small act of kindness echoed forward, changing the trajectory of worlds in ways too subtle to measure but too significant to ignore. Marcus would crash into many things during his explorations, but he would never crash into anything quite as transformative as the Forbidden Forest and the goddess who had been waiting 1,200 years for someone brave enough to listen. That was enough. Sometimes being enough was everything.